Hello, friends. You're on Empire Watch, the place where we don't chase headlines, we examine the logic behind them. In recent episodes, we talked about Donald Trump's cautious tone when it comes to Russia and Ukraine. Some of you commented, "That's not fear, that's responsibility." Fair point. No one in Washington wants to see the world slide into a nuclear confrontation. But let's be honest, the talk about an imminent nuclear war has become more of a ritual than a reality. And in this video, we'll explain why that war will not happen, and why Russia's nuclear threats are less about strength and more about survival. Behind all the noise lies something far more revealing, a psychological layer. This isn't about military readiness. It's about how fear itself became a political resource. Why does one word, nuclear, still make leaders pause, journalists hold their breath, and markets tremble? Because fear is a universal language, and Moscow speaks it fluently. For years, the Kremlin has relied on the same formula. We are ready to use all means if our interests are threatened. Those words aren't meant to be acted upon. They're meant to be heard. They're designed to shape perception, not policy. It's a performance, not preparation. When Russia repeats this phrase, it isn't signaling strength. It's reminding the world that it still matters. When your diplomatic and economic leverage shrink, fear becomes your last instrument of influence. Remember the early months of the war. Kyiv asked for lethal aid, and most Western governments hesitated. They feared that arming Ukraine would provoke Moscow, that Putin might escalate. That hesitation was the first victory of nuclear blackmail. But over time, something changed. Each time Russia promised consequences like you've never seen, nothing happened. No strikes, no nuclear alert, no red lines crossed. The pattern became clear. The louder the threats, the weaker the position. And by 2024, the West had stopped flinching. Countries that once refused to send helmets were now delivering tanks, air defense systems, and long-range missiles. Fear gave way to clarity. Russia was bluffing. The era when Moscow could control global reactions with a single sentence. "We are ready to use all means," so is over. Let's move from psychology to capability. Yes, Russia remains the world's largest nuclear power, around 500 warheads. According to the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, 2025, roughly 1,900 of them are tactical, designed for battlefield use. But possession does not equal usability. Launching a nuclear strike is not the decision of one man pressing a red button. It's a multi-layered process involving confirmation from at least 3 officials: the President, the Minister of Defense, and the Chief of the General Staff. This is verified by open-source research. Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, Federation of American Scientists, and Rand Corporation. The system known as CHEGIT is part of a secure communication network, not a trigger. It ensures that no single individual can act impulsively. There's also the technical side. Russia's tactical nuclear warheads are stored separately from their delivery systems. To prepare even one for use requires transportation, assembly, command authorization, and satellite visible movement. That process would take hours, if not days, and would be immediately detected by US and NATO intelligence. In other words, the sudden nuclear strike is a myth, but the bigger issue isn't technical and it's logical. A nuclear weapon is not a tool of victory. It's a tool of deterrence. Once it's used, deterrence collapses. The moment Russia crosses that line, it loses the very fear it feeds on. That's why, for the Kremlin, nuclear weapons are not an option. They're a prop, a symbol of status, a reminder of Soviet power, a psychological relic that says, we're still a superpower. But symbols fade when they stop inspiring fear. And today, fear itself is fading. Saying Putin might press the button sounds dramatic, but a nuclear strike would expose everything the Kremlin wants to hide. It would prove that Russia couldn't win conventionally, that its army and leadership have failed. It would turn an image of control into an image of desperation. Politically, a nuclear strike solves nothing. It doesn't secure victory. It unites the West and it isolates Moscow even further. Psychologically, it contradicts Putin's own self-image. He sees himself not as a destroyer, but as a restorer, the man who saves the empire. Turning cities into ash doesn't fit that narrative. He also understands that a nuclear use would close every door. Diplomacy, Chinese mediation, even the possibility of regime survival. It's the point of no return, and Putin, for all his aggression, has always avoided that final step. So what remains? Words. Nuclear rhetoric becomes a survival mechanism, a way to stay in the spotlight when real influence is shrinking. It's a bluff dressed up as strength, a performance aimed not at generals, but at audiences, Western voters, media, and nervous investors. The truth is simple. When Putin says we are ready for anything, he isn't demonstrating power. He's hiding fear. A confident leader doesn't issue warnings. Only the uncertain ones do. Every era has its defining fear. During the Cold War, it was mutual annihilation. Today, it's unpredictability. But fear only works while people believe in it. Once the world sees that behind the threat there's hesitation, the spell breaks. That's exactly what's happening now. The West that once feared escalation now acts with confidence. Markets no longer collapse after every statement from the Kremlin. Even within Russia's own elite, the word nuclear has lost its sacred aura. Moscow has overplayed its hand. It can no longer stop the war, or the world, by brandishing the specter of apocalypse. The bluff is exposed, and the moment fear stops working, the one who used it becomes its prisoner. That's Putin's paradox. He built his power on fear, and now fear reveals his weakness. Because the louder you threaten, the clearer it becomes that you're running out of options. Fear was his fuel. Now it's running out. And when the fire dies, there's only silence. A silence in which the world no longer trembles. It simply watches. We'll examine why Russia will never use tactical nuclear weapons against Ukraine, and why such a step would destroy not just its image of greatness, but its strategic foundation. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. Like, share, or support the channel if you value independent analysis. See you next time, and stay safe.